And welcome back to Dark Side of the Mic. And after a wee break where my other work has just been crazy busy for the last little while, we're back with a vengeance today, and we're responding to some of the common questions I've received surrounding the SE Electronics DynaCaster up against the Shure SM7B. Now these are two mics that people seem to be considering together at the moment. Broadcast dynamics, similar price points, but the DynaCaster does have a few party tricks up its sleeve that have people talking about it. So the first thing I want to touch on is the sound. A lot of people have asked is how close does the DynaCaster get to the SM7B? Now the SM7B has that signature dark broadcast dynamic sound that's just wonderfully soft and warm for vocals, and up until this point I can't think of any mic that I've tried that really gets close to this for spoken word. But I think the DynaCaster does make a really good stab at it, especially if you stick it on the low end boost setting on the EQ and then leave the high end flat. Those settings on the mic for me become the closest to the stock SM7B sound. It's not identical, but for me it's definitely in around the same ballpark. For me, the DynaCaster feels slightly more extended in the high end, as if it's picking up more of those frequencies, and as a result feels ever so slightly more airy, articulate maybe even perhaps more neutral than the SM7B, but this is very subtle. If anything, I think the SM7B still feels to me slightly stronger in the low mids. It just feels slightly more robust on my voice, which I think does react a little bit more to those frequencies. But I think overall, when we jump back and forward, you have to be really paying attention to notice a difference here. The mileage in your voice may vary, of course, but I think with these settings, bass, boost and flat, it gets very close on the DynaCaster. Next up, I want to talk about noise, and this is something a lot of you have asked about. The biggest gripe people have with the SM7B is the amount of gain it needs in order to hit good levels. And if you're using fairly standard interface preamps, like most of us are, the chances are it's going to get a wee bit hissy. Now hiss is quite subjective. For me it's a bit like noise or grain in film images. I personally don't mind it if it's consistent because your ears adapt to the listen, and sometimes it can even add a little bit of character or texture to spoken word. But others will be looking for a cleaner, perhaps more sterile recording to work with. So in that sense, how does the DynaCaster compare? Does it offer anything better? So for this demonstration or test then, and to try and minimise the room noise, I'm going to record both mics under my duvet. I'm afraid there's no box of doom here. And I'm going to record at delivery level. So I'm aiming for peaks of -3 dB as opposed to -12 dB. And we'll measure the noise of both the SM7B and the DynaCaster in both its active and its passive modes. So I'm hoping we get a sense of whether the active mode in the DynaCaster is really worth it. Does it colour the sound? Does it add its own noise? Now clearly the preamp noise will be a factor in this test. I'll be using the PodTrack P4 for these recordings. It's the only thing small enough I can get under the duvet to work with. Nevertheless, I think it has excellent preamps to a point, so that's something to just bear in mind with this exercise. Okay, so you're now listening to the Shure SM7B being recorded into the PodTrack P4 under the duvet, very warm. And we have our levels on the PodTrack at just over 6 out of 10 in order to be hitting approximately -3 dB. It's quite hard to tell on the level meters there, but I think it's about -3 dB. And this is how it sounds. So we'll stop for a few seconds of silence and we'll measure the noise floor. And at this point, we've moved over onto the SE Electronics DynaCaster, going into the PodTrack P4, under the duvet again. And we've had to move our level down a little bit just to hit the same amount of level. This mic's just slightly more sensitive than what the SM7B is. And we'll stop for a few seconds of silence before I run out of air. Okay, so now we've moved over onto the DynaCaster in the active mode. The inbuilt preamp provides about 28 dB of additional gain. So that means we've turned down our gain on the PodTrack to about 3 out of 10. And this is how it sounds. So let's measure the noise floor and see what results we get. And just for your listening pleasure or your future mixtapes, here are those noise floors back to back. Okay then, so I think it's fair to say that the DynaCaster, even in its passive mode, offers a reasonably noticeable noise improvement over the SM7B. But the active mode only offers a tiny, slight improvement beyond that. So I think if you have a decent preamp to begin with, there's no real perceptible advantage to using the 28dB boost mode if you don't need to. But if your preamp is a total dog, it may well save the day in that respect in terms of noise. And that could be the thing that tips the scales over which mic you choose. So that about wraps it up for this week. Let me know what you think. I think for me, the SM7B still has that something, maybe a little bit extra weight to the recordings that would make me pick it over the DynaCaster for pure sound, but it's very, very close. And if you're looking for a cleaner recording, the DynaCaster would be the way to go. But until next time, take care, and we'll see you then.